and I will be presenting you how to run and scale a BlazeMeter JMeter script up to 50,000 and even more if you need to. We'll start with a short description of what we're going to do. First of all, I'm sure that a lot of you are familiar with BlazeMeter. I'm going to do like a quick session about what is BlazeMeter and what you can do with it. After that, 10 minutes of explaining basic concepts of BlazeMeter phrase, and I just want to make a quick ground for everybody to understand the concepts. Third, we're going to go over the process, which is trying to understand how do you take a script which run locally on your computer and scale it up to the amount of users you want. We'll do a short demo of how to implement the process, and then a 10-minute session of Q&A. And as Ophir said, you can feel free to post your questions in the GoToMeeting questions place in the small dashboard you have. So what is BlazeMeter? BlazeMeter is a cloud-based performance testing platform. We 100% compatible with JMeter, and basically allow you to load test your, usually it will be your web server, but any kind of protocol which JMeter support, using Amazon or behind the firewall servers, and you can start using it, use JMeter, and once you're ready and your script is okay, you can upload it to BlazeMeter, and we save all the maintenance of server and everything. We just spin them for you, dedicated for you, and run the load from the Amazon servers or, of course, on-premise services that you have. Things we can do with BlazeMeter is, of course, first and most important, find and fix performance bottlenecks. Get the realistic capacity planning. If you have a site and you want to know what happened in 10,000 users, that's the capacity you are planning to have. We allow you to do it. And of course, not only ensuring the capacity is okay, but also understand how much capacity you can have. So for instance, 10,000 is okay, but can I go to 20,000? Can I go to 50,000? We allow you to do that also. Anything that is HTTP, we can create a script or use your script to do that. We're 100% JMeter compatible, but not only that, we have a lot of integration with CI or APM tools, such as Jenkins, New Relic, CloudBees, Bamboo, even CloudWatch of Amazon, which makes using JMeter easier. So for instance, every time you do a build, you can tell Jenkins to run a BlazeMeter server, a BlazeMeter test, excuse me, to validate that the performance after the build is okay and to complete the build. If you have New Relic, then of course, anytime during the load test, you can see what happened with your New Relic, of course, with the data you gather from New Relic. So you don't have to use both dashboards. You can have from single dashboard what happened with the load test and what happened with your backend servers. Some basic concept of BlazeMeter. First of all, let's talk about what is a server. Everybody knows that the server is one machine. When I say server, I'm referring to a machine which is part of BlazeMeter load test scenario. Server can be either a console or an engine. Let's talk about what is a console. In BlazeMeter, a console is basically a machine that is responsible for managing the load engines. You can have one console that will also be the load engine, what we call a single server load test. And you can have a console which controls several amount of engines. If you have one console and one engine, the load test itself will come only from the engine. In BlazeMeter, the console has some other part that you need to do. First of all, we create the waterfall report for you from the console. The console also responsible for sending the real-time feature command. So for instance, if during the load test you want to push parameters to your script, the console is responsible to do that. Of course, because it's all about JMeter, and based on JMeter, the console also responsible for aggregating the report from each engine and present the graph that you see in BlazeMeter. Sandbox test is basically a concept that we invented in BlazeMeter. Any kind of test that is up to 300 users and using only a console and is up to 50 minutes is considered a sandbox test, and it's free. The reason we give that sandbox test feature is because when you create the JMeter script on your local machine, then upload it to the cloud, there are some things that you need to verify that they are working. So for instance, if you're using a CSV file and you perhaps used a path to that file and not the current path, if you upload the script and don't test it in the cloud, you might get a file not found, of course. So for those matters, we give the sandbox test. So each test that is up to 300 users and use only console, it's not we won't charge, we will not credit you for that, and that's basically to verify that the script is actually working in BlazeMeter. So for instance, if you're using your own plugin and you want to make sure that the plugin works okay with BlazeMeter, if you're using if you have a different kind of Java version than BlazeMeter and you want to understand that everything works in BlazeMeter, use the sandbox test. Engine, if you've done distributed test in JMeter, this should be familiar to you. Engine basically is one part of a cluster that's responsible for creating and executing the script and therefore the HTTP requests. So for instance, if I have a test which has one console and one engine, and the engine is responsible for creating the threads and creating the load of your script. A cluster is basically a topology or architecture that is using one console and up to 14 engines. Each cluster can have up to 14 engines. Of course, you can have less engines, and this is what we call a cluster in BlazeMeter. Master-slave is a way in BlazeMeter to run several clusters with one test or from one place. So for instance, let's call a cluster a test, and each test can have up to 14 engines. If I need to go further, then I can create multiple tests. All of them will be a slave, and from one master test, I can control whether I start the master test to start all the slaves. If I want to push properties to the master and to the slave, I'm doing it from the master. And of course, the master goes to each slave and aggregate the report to a unique tab called master load results. And that's the way you can achieve over 10,000 and 50,000 users, or for instance, run a single test from multiple locations without, of course, in JMeter you can't do it because you have to create all the JMeters in separate regions. In BlazeMeter, you can simply create as many slaves as you want, and each slave can have its own configuration. So for instance, it can have its region, unique JMX script. You can have network emulation properties, and therefore cloning is a unique case of master-slave. Sometimes you don't want to create, you don't need this kind of a dynamic. You only want to have 30 engines coming from a single region. All the configuration are the same. So what will happen is, and I will show it in the live demo, if you take and add more than 14 engines per cluster, we automatically create a clone test, which is a unique case of master-slave. And therefore, you can have all those engines coming from the same region with the same configuration. Okay, next slide. How should we scale up? First of all, scaling up from 105,000 users to 50 is a process. First of all, we need to create the test and the script locally and verify that it actually works. For that, we have a great tool called Chrome extension, BlazeMeter Chrome extension, which can record everything from the Chrome and create the JMX for you. We also are going to release a feature which allow you to create any JMX from JSON, pickup, which is like Wireshark recording, or from a HAR file, commonly used in Selenium, and it will create the JMX for you. Then after the script works locally and everything is okay, can use the sandbox test to verify that it's actually working in BlazeMeter and you didn't put a path or forgot to upload the plugin dependencies or something like that. And then verify the script actually works in BlazeMeter. Later on, you will want to understand the amount of threads you can apply to one engine in BlazeMeter without crashing the engine. You can do that because we give you the monitor tab in the load report. So in order to do that, what you need to do is ramp up, like a long ramp up to 1,000 users, and long can be 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and use one console and one engine, and monitor the load engine and understand where exactly do you reach 70% of CPU memory, or for instance, 80% of memory usage. And I'm referring to 70 and 80 because in BlazeMeter, you get the average value per minute. So if you had 70% average of CPU usage, you probably reached 100% during that minute, and you see only 70%. So if you go above 70%, then decrease the amount of threads per engine, and then just add more engines. In our case, when you reach the 70% CPU, you go to the load results and verify the amount of users you had in that point in time. Then take 10% or 50% off just to be on the safe side, and then you have the amount of threads per engine that you can run using your script. Another thing you can do is, of course, make your script more efficient. For instance, have a script here. Usually users don't put timers. This is something that you want to say, yeah, I want to create as much heat as I want. But the thing is, in JMeter, if you don't create that small timer, even a 20 or 200 milliseconds timer, JMeter is trying to excessively use the CPU. And of course, another good reason to put the timer is actually simulating the real user thinking time. So user will not just press links in a matter of instance. He will spend some time in that page. The Chrome extension, if you use the Chrome extension, it's also recording the thinking time of your scenario. So you will get a feeling of how much time the user is spending from the in that particular page if you recorded the script from the Chrome extension. Another thing, so let's add that small timer here. Constant timer for 300 seconds, that would be okay. Another thing is disable those listeners. BlazeMeter creates its own listeners and does not use those listeners. They're just using CPU and memory. If you need to use a listener, then just drop that file to a JTL file so you can read it later if you need it. You can, of course, download the sample JTL file of BlazeMeter from your report. You will have it as a JSON, as a CSV, and as a zip, which contain the entire test data. And of course, the sample JTL itself. For instance, if you want to use a JTL for your own use, no problem. Use the simple data writer and state that the file name that you want. But on the configuration, make sure you don't check the XML, because XML create a DOM file which actually raise the CPU usage that you'll need during the load test. If you need more best practices about how to make your script more efficient, we have a great blog which is called JMeter Performance and Tuning Tips. You can find a lot of tips, some of them I mentioned here, about how to make your script more efficient. Okay, so we got the script. We know how much threads we can squeeze from a single engine. Then all we need to do is just add more engines, up to 14 engines per cluster, and save the test, and of course run it. Why we need to run the test as a cluster? Sometimes you can create too much data from all the engines and the console may break. So you want to test your cluster And once you test the cluster and verify that you get the amount of hits or users, everything works perfectly, and the console can manage this kind of data, you have one cluster, which is a test, and you can add or use the master-slave test to create as many users as you want. So for instance, let's talk in numbers. If I have one engine that can execute 500 threads, then I can create 10 engines and I have 5,000 threads per cluster. And if I want to reach 10,000 or 50,000, all I need to do is just duplicate the slave and add it to the master, run the master, and reach the 5,000 threads. But we talked about not only doing a capacity. We want to know how much my browser, excuse me, my backend server wanna reach. So during the load test, what we can do is add more slave dynamically. So for instance, I had my clusters, my 10 clusters, and now I want to know if I can reach, let's say, 15,000 instead of 10,000 users. No problem. All I need to do is during the load test, duplicate 5 more slaves and then add them to the master and just start them. The master will automatically grab the results from those additional slaves and aggregate them into the aggregate report, everything on real time. So you don't have to stop and restart the test. Okay, let's, instead of talking, I'll go to the QA later, let's do the process. So here is my script. I've disabled, it's very simple, and of course, I don't want to create 50,000 threads on BlazeMeter, so I've used the dummy sampler for that. I've disabled my listeners, including the one with the JTL, don't need it, and I added a small constant throughput timer, just a constant timer. Save, and I'll go to BlazeMeter. Create a small test just to verify that everything works. Well, sandbox test. Upload the script. After I fix it, I should have changed it to now a good script. And let's talk about how I configure it. For the first part, I need to verify that the script actually works. So I can use up to 300 users here. Just scroll it to 300. Okay. Yeah, I will use the regular ramp up just to verify that 5 minutes ramp up will be enough. And of course, select my JMeter version. The region, if it's important for you, you can change the region, but for now, the purpose of the sandbox is verify that the script actually works okay in BlazeMeter, and we don't get any kind of errors regarding the file, regarding a plugin that is missing. To verify that, we will start that particular test, and we will look at the monitoring and on the log files which BlazeMeter creates for you. On the log file, we are looking for some kind of a non-GUI error, something like that, or missing file, or any kind of course, we want to see load results to verify that the JMeter actually produced the load test and I don't have something that is blocking my site. We often get people that are saying, okay, I've run the test using a BlazeMeter, but I get 404 and I don't see anything on my backend. So what you need to do is we in BlazeMeter block some particular sites from being loaded. So if you're trying to load that site, you're probably being blocked by BlazeMeter. So all you need to do is just contact our support and say, hi, I'm from, let's say, Google or CNN or something like that, and I want to conduct a load test on my site. And we will whitelist you just so you'll be able to do that load test. Okay, let's go to the report and see that our tests run successfully. Okay, in the logs we can see that is the machine, the private IP, everything is from Amazon right now. And okay, I'll leave it for the test to run. Let's talk about what we're looking at the report. This is the tour, by the way. Everybody can go to the tour and look at that particular report, which show our abilities. In the logs, I will go to JMeter 0, and of course I can download the entire log, and I will want to verify that first of all I've reached the point of starting threads. So you can see here my thread start. That means JMeter was loaded successfully. All the plugins were loaded successfully. I can see, of course, a lot of the Java version of the machine, kind of JMeter I'm using, and of course the operating system and everything, which can, if I see some kind of a problem, can help me to debug my script and understand what's happening. Another thing that I want to look is the monitoring tab. And this is relevant to the third part we talk about. Understand how much threads I can squeeze inside one load engine. During the load test, I have the load results and I can see the ramp up to 200 users, okay, and go to the monitoring and verify what happened during the load test. Here I can see I reached just below 60% CPU, and memory was not an issue here. Of course, if I suspect that the network is the bottleneck, I can go into the network tab and see how much I/O I've produced or the amount of connections. But usually it will be the CPU and memory. If I'm reaching more than 65, 70% of CPU or 80% of memory, I can look in this particular point in time. Let's assume it's 512, and then go here and understand what happened in that particular time. So did I reach the 200 users? Did I reach 500 users? Assuming I've reached 500 users, I can decrease the amount of threads to 450, save the test, and that's the amount of users I'm going to get from a single engine. After I got the amount of engines from a single engine, let's go to our sandbox test and edit the test. Okay. Assuming that our sandbox test runs successfully and I have 450 users per engine, can call it cluster 1 or better. My test slave 1. We said 450. Here we go. A ramp up. I didn't talk about the ramp up. When you are doing the ramp up on one engine, use a long ramp up. Use the 50 minutes duration and 40 minutes, maybe 45 minutes of ramp up, so you will have enough data on your report to understand the exact point in time when you reached 65 or 70% CPU. If you use just 5 seconds, or excuse me, not 5 seconds, 5 minutes of ramp up, you won't have enough data for that. So use that one console, one engine test to give you as much data as you need and understand the amount of users. But during the load test itself, you can simply do a 10 minutes ramp up or 5 minutes ramp up, depending on your scenario. Everything is configurable from here. Okay, so that's my test. I forgot to get the amount of engines. Let me show you what happened. So we reached up to 40 engines. Okay, if I go to 15, what will happen is we will use 2 consoles. On the back end, let's save the test and I'll show you what will happen. If I'll save the test, what happens is that BlazeMeter actually create another test for you, which is clone number 1. And when you press start, it will start both of the tests, and it's a particular test of master slave. As you can see here, one slave, which is called clone 1 of my test. In my case, I want to go for the most dynamic test I can have. It's the master slave, so I will just decrease it to 14 engines. Okay. And under the advanced test properties, I have 3 test types. Standalone, which is the common one. I can press the slave and assume that I want to have 3 slaves or 5 slaves, but for the presentation, I will just create 2 or 3 slaves. you have the duplicate. Instead of going and uploading the script, everything again, just press duplicate. It will automatically create the same test with the same configuration, JMeter script and everything. All you need to do is just change it to slave number 2. Just some cosmetics here. And choose another region. For instance, here we're going to run from Singapore. And if I need to change the CSV file, or I want to change the entire scenario, I want a different JMX, or this test will actually emulate a network from 3G or something like that. That's not a problem. Can have totally different slaves from one single master. Okay, so let's save that test. And now we're going to create the actual master, which is going to start the entire test from different regions. So again, pressing duplicate. Okay, now it will be my test master. So it will be easier to read. Again, any kind of region you want. Let's go for Ireland. Cool. And here on the advanced test properties, I will choose master. And you can see that I have a lot of cloning and master slave here. And to do just go and pick the test I've just created, my test slave number 1 and my test slave number 2. Press save. And you can see those 2 tests here. And of course, my own master configuration, which is same thing, 14 engines. And yeah, that's it. Before we'll start that, let's go back to our sandbox test and see what happened there. Okay. So here the log. Yeah, I can see the thread started. I don't get any kind of weird errors or something like that, but just to be sure, let's download the entire log file. Okay. Nope, everything looks okay. Thread starts, and I can stop the test. Again, this is only for demonstration, of course, but after the sandbox test, do the one console and one engine, and after that, run one cluster, no master slave, just one cluster to verify that the console can handle the data. If not, that's not a problem. In some plans in BlazeMeter, you can upgrade the machine type itself. If you're not in that kind of plan, no problem. Decrease the amount of load engines and then just add more slaves later to get the same amount of users capacity, but use more resources for that. Okay, so selected to start test. Just wait for the slave to finish. Okay, meanwhile, I'm seeing Aegis Collins ask for, do all plans allow for these parameters when using Sandbox? First of all, as I mentioned, Sandbox is each test that you can reach 300 users with 50 minutes and using console only, meaning no engines at all. The Sandbox test is available from the Pro and above. We currently launched a new pricing page. So if you have the Pro or Pro Plus, you automatically have the Sandbox test. If you have a costume plan, then you can contact your account manager and ask, do I have the Sandbox test? You should have the Sandbox test if it's Pro and above. Okay. I want to verify the test has actually stopped. Let's talk about when we press stop, we have the graceful and the terminate. The difference between them is gracefully will actually tell BlazeMeter and of course the JMeter shut down properly and save all the data and upload it to BlazeMeter. So for instance, you've started the test, you've reached the bottleneck, okay? You don't see any meaning to continue with the test. You press the stop gracefully and everything is okay. If you've reached, for instance, for some reason you crashed the site during real time, or you accidentally start a test and you need to stop it as quickly as you can, press the stop and terminate. This will actually destroy the machine as fast as we can, but you won't get any data from that. So take that in mind. If you want to download the JTL file or anything regarding the test, don't press the terminate. Press the graceful shutdown. But if you got like somebody complained that he needs the site right now and you need to immediately stop the test, you don't getting the data is less important, then press the terminate and we'll kill the machines as fast as we can. Okay, so the slave number 1 has finished. Let's go to the master, start the test, and remember, each slave can have its own unique configuration. Currently, those slaves coming from different regions with the same script. Each slave contains 14 engines, and we have a totally of 42 engines. So let's go. You can see all the slave launching test number this and slave number that. Let's go to the report. When you do the master slave configuration, here is a standalone configuration. When you do a master slave, you'll get the load results for the master itself, of course, but you will also have a different tab here, an additional tab called master load result. The master load results will show you the results of the master, including all the slaves, and if you added any slaves later on after the test, it will also include that. And of course, the aggregate report will also be for the master, including the slaves. So you don't have to go to each slave and view the report, although you can. For instance, if you've chosen to emulate a network of 3G or a particular scenario, you can go to that particular slave and see what happened, just as you do with a regular result, a regular test. So you can see all the engines here. This is only the engines of the master. And we'll wait a few more minutes. So all the slaves and the master will start pushing the results to BlazeMeter. Regarding the slaves, regarding the engine and console after the test, each test we spin dedicated servers for you. After the test is finished, we copy all the data for your report to BlazeMeter, and then the machine is being terminated. I don't know how many of you knows about what is terminated in Amazon, but basically you can't reach that data anymore. So we do that for security reasons, of course, because you're using JMX, you upload your script with maybe some data that you don't want it to be shared. That's not a problem. After the test has been finished, we terminate that server, and basically, unless you have a magical way to get that from Amazon, can't get that data, and of course nobody else can get that data. So 2 users that are running the test can share data between them, not through BlazeMeter. Okay, so here you can see we have each load engine log file. So as I said, each load engine log file. Basically the same as the console we saw at the sandbox. Again, this is something you need to verify that works okay in the cluster stage. and verify you don't get any kind of weird errors here. We had an issue with one of our customers that was running with Java version 1.6, and for some reason his test didn't process the HTTPS correctly. There is an issue in Java 1.7 which doesn't support MD2 certificates anymore because they are not safe. So this will give you a good details about the engine, what is it used to run, and if you can debug it using that information, change the script or understand what is wrong, so and of course fix it. You can see the master load results, which automatically creates once one of the slaves or the master itself push data to BlazeMeter. Wait a few more minutes to the entire test to start. Remember, it's 3 tests in parallel. Okay, master monitoring, which will show you in all the engines of your test. You can look from here, see it. Let's go and open one of our slaves so we can see it while the test is running. So here's my slave. Okay, this is one of the slaves and this is the master. Great. We see that some of the information start to come here. You can see here the load results, which, as I mentioned, shows only the master data itself. Master load results, which aggregate the entire data to the master itself. Monitoring and master monitoring, same thing. You can see all the load engines from here and see if you can just create a small circle here. You can see what happened with the CPU usage. During the load test, this is the thing that promises you that the load engines themselves are not the bottleneck. So for instance, if you add more users and you don't get more hits or you don't get a different response time, and you want to verify that the load engines are not the issue, maybe it's some kind of a firewall or something that is lowering the network, you can see it from here and understand if you had any kind of bottleneck with the load engines themselves. And basically that's the way you can reach how many users you want, because you have the amount of users per cluster, in our case 5,000. You can add any kind of as much slaves as you want to reach 50, 500. If you have, for instance, the enterprise plan, which you can change the machine type to extra large or higher kind of type, you can add more users per engine. And during the load test, if you, we didn't talk about the dynamic. Let's add one more slave to the load test during the actual load test. So I have the slave here, and I'll go and just duplicate it. So just press duplicate. Okay, great. Call it slave number 3, dynamic. Okay, that's and another, again, any kind of configuration you want. Verify that it's a slave and you don't create it as a master by accidentally duplicating the master. Press save. Great. So we'll go back to our master test, press edit, because we want to add that new slave to BlazeMeter, to the test, of course. Go to the advanced test properties. And you can see my test slave dynamic here. All I need to do is just click, select it, press save, and then I can start once the save has been completed, go to the dynamic 3 and press start. Okay, here's the master. Let's go back to the report. Okay, I'll answer some questions while the test is running. We have a question about is it possible to receive from BlazeMeter standard JMeter log files, aggregate hits per second threads? That's a good question. As I said, you can download the entire test to your own computer using the zip file. This is possible after the test has been complete. You can see here the JSON and the CSV file are already present. After the load test has been complete, you'll have another button here, which is the zip file. The zip file will contain the JMX. If you had any kind of CSV file or configuration file, it will contain it. It will contain the sample JTL, which is the thing that you want, and it will also contain the sample JTL of the entire test, of course. You can take that sample JTL and process it as much as you want. It's basically an XML file, which shows each request which was initiated during the load test. Of course, the master and the slaves themselves. So that's the way you can take the actual JTL file of JMeter and see it for yourself. Another question we have: can we test the cloud-based application using BlazeMeter? Yes, you can test a cloud-based application. I happen to know a couple of customers that are on Amazon, for instance. If you have your own application, there is not a problem to test them. If you have an application which is running on, let's say, Virginia in Amazon, you might try to not use Virginia as the load test region, because then you won't check the actual band. You'll be inside Virginia zone. So I will recommend to use another region, probably not in the same country, or maybe east or west side, and not use the same region, of course, because you miss some crucial elements during the load test. Okay, we have a great question from Kate. Is it possible to specify a ramping scenario using JMX script, but not specify it in BlazeMeter? Great question, Kate. Let's go and see the edit page of the test. First of all, you have this override basic JMeter parameters. If you want to control the script yourself, that's not a problem. You can just uncheck that, and BlazeMeter will take the JMX configuration to the and use it in the load test. For instance, there are a couple of more sophisticated thread groups. If you've downloaded the JMeter thread groups, you're probably aware of them. For instance, you have the ultimate thread group. If you use the ultimate thread group, or for instance, you have more than one thread group here, then uncheck the override basic thread groups parameter. and I explain why. We override every thread group that is inside the JMeter script. So if you have two thread groups with different parameters, you don't want us to override all the thread groups. So control them within the script and uncheck the override. And the override does not work on the ultimate thread group because, of course, you've chosen to use the ultimate thread group. You want the exact thread group here, and we will not override it. This option, however, is very, very useful if you want to control the amount of threads and ramp up without downloading the script, edit the script, and then re-upload it to BlazeMeter. So if you use any kind of different thread group other than the default one, or you use 2, 3, or 5 thread groups with different parameters, uncheck this option, and BlazeMeter will automatically take the script and use the inside configuration of the script to do that. Another thing that sometimes people are unaware of is the amount of iteration. If the test continues forever, if you choose test continues forever, then of course you limit it only by duration. But sometimes people use the do not override. And then usually you want to test it with 10 or 1 iteration. And after that, the script simply dies. And then you get a test with 50 duration, but it ends after 5 minutes. That's because the amount of iteration is only 1 or 10. You want to keep the amount of iteration to test continues forever, so you'll be able to limit it only by the duration time. Okay. Another question we have is, can we use Selenium functional script inside BlazeMeter? Good question. I hope I pronounced the name right, Rajashree. You can use Selenium inside JMeter. JMeter is fully support WebDriver, and you can use because we are supporting BlazeMeter. You are supporting JMeter. You can use the WebDriver in BlazeMeter. All you need to do for that, you have 2 ways to do it. One, you need to add the config element. Excuse me, it should be inside of a thread group. You need to add the Firefox element, which is this one. And you need to have the WebDriver sampler and write the WebDriver script inside it. Then upload the script to BlazeMeter. Take in mind that Selenium needs 1 core to run. So if you're planning to run a Selenium script, then you might want to use 1 or 2, maybe 3 threads entirely, because it's activating Firefox or Chrome driver, depends whatever you choose. And it will run the entire script from that Firefox or Chrome driver. So what I will suggest is first create the entire script with the JMeter and use JMeter to create the entire load. So for instance, if you want to reach 20,000, you want to create a script with JMeter to reach 20,000. Then you can simply, if you have a very simple script and you want to use Selenium for that, no problem. You can use our automated Selenium script here and just give it a title and a URL, and we will run the Selenium for you. If you have a complex script, then create another slave with your Selenium script as a JMX and run it, and we'll run everything for you. So this is about running Selenium using BlazeMeter. Let's see what happened with our load test here. Great. So you can see we've reached the 24, almost 24,000 users. Let's go to the master monitoring. You can see all the load engines here. By selecting them all, you can verify you don't have, you've not exceeded the 70% CPU usage. You can see here, I have 1 load engine that reached 53, which is probably the console of the master, but most of them are below the 26, below 40% CPU. You shouldn't see here something be higher than 60% if you follow the process. Regarding the console of the master, when you use master slave, we usually select it as an extra large machine. So you'll have more resources to create the entire aggregate report of everything. Okay, and because we wanted to reach more users, we added another slave during the load test, which you can see it was probably here. Since you see the ramp up started decreasing at that point in time. You can, of course, go to each of the slaves and run it separately without the master itself. It's basically the same test for everything, as just as a usual test. Following that process, you'll get the amount of users you want. Take in mind that you can run each slave either from Amazon or from the on-premise if you want to create a test which come from the cloud and from inside your network organization. If you have your own hosted servers which you want to use for the load test, that's also possible. You can install a BlazeMeter agent on that machine and run it. We support that as well. We don't have much time, so I'll answer just one more question. Is it possible to stop script execution automatically when a bottleneck will be specified? That's a great question, and it's on our roadmap to be able to have threshold for sites. And once that threshold, when you exceed that threshold, to stop the test or get a notification for that. Currently, you can't do that. The closest thing you can do is in Jenkins, which you can run test and then fail the build according to the Jenkins, according to the BlazeMeter results. So if you need to use Jenkins to verify if your last build was successfully or not, you can do that. It was a pleasure to present it to you, Ophir. If you have any last things.
No, thanks so much again, Rafael, for that great webinar. We will be again sending out a recording as soon as it's ready. It usually takes 48 hours to send it out. Also, stay tuned when we send out the link to the recording. We will be also sending you a link to the advanced JMeter webinar, which is going to happen at the end of this month. As always, if you have any questions about BlazeMeter, feel free to send an email to support@blazemeter.com, and we'll be more than happy to help you out. Again, thanks everyone. Have a great day and happy load testing.